Hi all, welcome to the live streaming and training on preparation for Azure 900 certification required for you to get basic understanding on cloud computing and specifically on Azure cloud. So this will be a 5-day live streaming session ranging from 45 minutes to 1 hour of session daily, with each day focusing on a particular topic related to uh, Azure and its and the basics of cloud computing. Today we will focus on the basic fundamental concepts of cloud computing. What is the purpose and the need? What was the need for cloud computing? And what was available for enterprises prior to cloud computing with respect to maintaining and managing the application and infrastructure. We'll also look into a bit more detail into shared responsibility model, which is one of the key factor of looking at utilizing cloud and cloud services. We'll go a bit more detail into different cloud types that are available, and before jumping into cloud services, what are the different types of services that are available for you to decide the best option for you as an enterprise. And we'll finally end with understanding a bit about total cost of ownership and understand how pricing and costing would work in a cloud environment. During any of this training, during the next 5 days, for if you have any questions or clarifications, feel free to put up a comment and I will ensure to respond to your comments with an answer or clarification of your questions or concerns. So let's begin today's session on focusing on fundamentals of cloud computing and various terms and terminologies that you need to be aware before getting into the bit of intermediate and advanced concepts of Azure and its services. So before understanding the cloud computing, it is important to know what was the need for cloud computing and what was available before cloud. Prior to cloud, every enterprise were managing their own data centers across the world in strategic locations, wherein the enterprise had to manage an entire facility of physical infrastructure like an data center with various servers installed and set up and configured to run the application and data required for the enterprise to run their business. Now, irrespective of the application traffic and the usage, the enterprise had to invest on the infrastructure cost, right from procuring the servers, in setting up the security, networking, and various other services, even before they're ready to deploy the applications and the data. So what it means that the organizations had to set up and invest in a high amount of infrastructure before they can even look at deploying the application and the data. What it means that there's a high cost of ownership at the beginning, uh, uh, and irrespective of the traffic, there was a need to purchase an infrastructure for a high possible in traffic, which may not be on a day-to-day basis. So with this kind of a data center setup, organizations were able to support and manage all their business needs with respect to application and various other uh, requirement, which also means that they had to take care of setting up the disaster recovery in multiple locations to ensure the business doesn't get impacted during any unexpected event. What it also meant that the enterprise had to do all the investment across the data centers, including the recovery site, to ensure they're ready for the application to be deployed. Now, this was good and possible, though and high cost. Every enterprise had to do this, and to ensure their business is in as uh, without impact. Now, this was not possible for smaller companies and smaller enterprises to have their own data center and have their own infrastructure to run their application. And that's where we had a bit of on-prem shared cloud, shared data center, which was basically shared by multiple enterprises but managed by one single entity. This is what was available prior to cloud. Now, let's understand what is cloud computing. Cloud computing, in simple terms, is nothing but delivering whatever is required with respect to compute and the data over the internet. Now, when we say computing services, it could be the data services, wherein how do you store, transfer, and manage the data across your organization. It could be the applications, it could be your APIs, your applications, or the front end services that you want to be available for the customer. Anything related to AI, ML services, or the IoT services, all of them are basically compute services that you can use, that you can avail over the internet when you're using cloud computing. Now, what are the benefits of cloud computing as compared to the legacy data center approach that enterprise were taking? So one of the key benefit of cloud computing is what is known as shared responsibility model. We'll look into this in detail in the upcoming slide. It basically is a way wherein the cloud service provider and the end customer manage and own the responsibility of the overall application and infrastructure in a way that is more beneficial to the customer. And depending on the type of the services, your shared responsibility would vary. Zero capex is another benefit wherein, unlike data center, the organizations and enterprise need not do heavy investment on the infrastructure at the beginning of the application in cloud as compared to the data center. The cloud computing also provides the benefit of as per the usage, which means that I the customer the organization need to pay only for the services they are using, not for the possible traffic or a possible high heavy infrastructure cost that is required because of the varying traffic. So the other benefits that cloud brings in is the flexibility with respect to payment, with respect to infrastructure. The organization will be able to scale up and scale down into their in their infrastructure depending on the need, depending on the traffic that they see. The reliability of cloud computing, because it's all available over the internet with a heavy bandwidth. There is always a very good reliability as one of the key SLA for any cloud service provider to ensure the organization, the application, and the customers will be able to rely on this infrastructure and the application at any given point of time. Finally, the disaster recovery is part of the cloud computing, wherein the various uh, every cloud provider has their cloud data centers across the world in strategic regions and strategic location, enabling them to allow disaster recovery enablement across the world to ensure smooth operation to the business. Now, we'll quickly look at the shared responsibility model. So when an organization is investing or is running an application in a data center or the cloud, there are various activities and setup that is required, right from access management to infrastructure, the operating system, networking, security, and finally the application and the data uh, of the organization itself. So when it comes to data center, everything from operating system to um, access to host network, data center to application is managed by the organization itself. But when we move to cloud, depending on the type of the services that will go in detail in the next few slides, depending on the type of the cloud service, the responsibility varies between the cloud service provider and the customer. So what it means that as you move from on-prem to cloud, uh, the cloud service provider will take the responsibility of, let's say, the networking side of it. The host, the data center itself is managed by the cloud service provider, and you would only focus on the application and the access side of the application instead of focusing on the core networking and security. And so as you see here, SAS, PAS, and IAS, which will go in detail, each provide varying responsibility that is shared between the provider and the customer. So this is the key aspect of a cloud computing, which may not be possible in an on-prem where everything is owned and managed by the enterprise itself. Now, let's quickly look at what are the different cloud computing providers that are available and the services. First type is, we look at what are the types that are available. And when we say types, it could basically be whether it's uh, the cloud access that is provided to the end customer, how are they provided. The first type is the private cloud. Now, private cloud you can imagine is similar to your data center, which is in a in a location which is privately owned or privately run by a service provider to a particular organization. So here the customer has a complete ownership and control over the resources and security, including data and application security. So in a way, this is nothing but the data center approach that previously we had, but still managed by an external service provider like Microsoft, AWS, and Google. The other one, which is popularly known and we all hear, like Azure Cloud, is the public cloud. So public cloud is a cloud which is built and controlled by third-party providers like Microsoft and Azure. So in this case, the customer has no capital expense at the beginning, but as they scale, as the need increases, they pay for the services and the resources they use. So that's one of the common public cloud is a commonly used and commonly heard cloud service types or cloud types that we are aware of. Now, hybrid is something that is being that is picked up recently, wherein you have a combination of private cloud and public cloud. A typical scenario here could be a scenario where the data is on-prem but applications are on cloud. In that case, you need to have a hybrid cloud wherein the data is secure in your private cloud or on-prem while application runs on the public cloud. So this is also something commonly used architecture with respect to data and application, and the end customer has a full control over the application and its execution. Now let's look at one more type of cloud before going to cloud services, which is the sovereign cloud or the government cloud. So, in case of Azure, Azure has something known as a government cloud, which in case of in locations like in locations like US, the complete government initiatives and government data is also run on the cloud, which is not accessible to the public customers and public access. And there is a different process with respect to getting access to the government cloud. And similarly, in China, Azure has a data center, which is also known as sovereign cloud, which has its own specific rules and conditions focused on the China region and China policies, which also means that the data in the sovereign cloud cannot be moved outside China, and connectivity between the external cloud data centers with this particular data in China has to undergo various setups and various approvals for it to be enabled. So sovereign cloud and government cloud are also a new type of cloud that have come up with a limited access and focus towards a government entity or a particular country, depending on their need and the policies. So now we'll jump into the cloud services. As we saw in the shared responsibility model, there are many cloud types of cloud services that a customer can look at when looking into moving into cloud. So the first is the infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure as a service is wherein the customer is utilizing the infrastructure on the cloud, and everything else is still managed by the customer. So infrastructure as a cloud could be creating a virtual machine on the cloud and manually deploying the application into the environment uh, uh, through whatever tools and services that the customer is using. So in infrastructure as a service, uh, only the infrastructure is managed by the cloud provider, and everything else is managed by the customer. The second is the platform as a service. Now, platform as a service is built on top of the infrastructure, wherein cloud service provider additionally controls and owns the various security and patching and upgrades required for the infrastructure, like the VM operating systems or your app services or any other services that you need to to deploy your application without having to worry about upgrading the versions of your software and services that is needed to run your application. So a platform as a service is what uh, the customer would try once he's comfortable with using their application on the cloud with infrastructure as a service. Now, software as a service is a model where everything end to end is managed and by the cloud provider, and you only focus as a customer on enhancing your application, deploying the new version of the application, and managing the access to the application with various terms. So software as a service is an approach where most of the responsibility is owned by the cloud provider, except for the application and application access and the versioning and various other details, so allowing the customer to focus on the application itself rather than the infrastructure, the networking and security. So depending on the application, depending on various other factors like business criticality and various other details, the the proposed approach would vary to the customer. So some of the examples of infrastructure as a service are like the lift and shift migration, wherein you have an on-prem application which you're just trying to take as is and deploy into cloud. Platform as a service could be any cloud-based, cloud-native solutions that we build using cloud services, like an app service or Azure SQL database. And software as a service is like your Office 365 and various other applications that you get direct access to manage and build. Now, before uh, getting into the core of cloud services, uh, let's quickly look at the concept of total cost of ownership with respect to and understand a bit about what is capex and opex. So these two capex and opex are basically a way for an enterprise to manage their investment into the infrastructure and application. So capex is a part wherein there is an initial investment done for the application to be ready and deployed, and opex is generally where when the application is operational, you have expense to do that. So capex is basically is an upfront expenditure. As I said, in case of a data center, the capex was basically the customer had to invest in the infrastructure, even though the expected traffic is high in future, but not at the right time. Customer had to invest in infrastructure for the highest possible traffic. Now, in case of OPEX, it is based on a consumption model. So what it means that as I grow, as a customer, as I grow, I pay for the infrastructure as based on the need rather than upfront. Now, capex generally leads to overestimation or underestimation. Now, overestimation is as a customer, if I expect heavy millions of traffic, millions of requests for a particular event in a year, I still have to estimate for the same do for the rest of the year and do, and which also means that I may underestimate with respect to not expecting and traffic on a particular event or particular day, but end up at getting the traffic and not having the infrastructure to support. I mean, in case of OPEX, it is pay as you go, and you could scale up and scale down the infrastructure as you grow or as you need, allowing you to control the same. So basically, with what we have seen so far, data centers are capex, while cloud computing of work on the model of the opex, which itself provides a big advantage for the customer to run their business. So now quickly let's look at the consumption model, which is the core concept or core part of Azure Cloud and cloud itself. As we saw, consumption model, there is no upfront cost, whether I'm going to infrastructure as a service, which is the starting or a base service. Infrastructure as a cost, infrastructure as a service doesn't need me to invest anything except purchasing the infrastructure and paying for the same. And again, there is no need to purchase a heavy, costly infrastructure when I don't see a need for it as a customer. And the ability to automatically scale up and scale down the infrastructure depending on the traffic allows for the customer to pay for only the resources that the customer is using, not for the overall infrastructure. So, which also means that customer need not pay for the resource that is no longer required. So, this let's quickly recap the various topics that we have learned and the details around what we covered. We started off with cloud computing fundamentals, understanding the data center and how cloud computing helps customers to manage their capex and infrastructure better with the cloud rather than data center. We understood, I go into detail into shared responsibility model, and before getting into understanding various cloud types and cloud services, which is all basic fundamental cloud concepts and terms that are needed for you to understand Azure, and as we go into detail in upcoming sessions and upcoming days. So now we'll also cover a bit of on day two, which is tomorrow. We are going to go in detail into various architectural components. We look into basics of networking, understand what are the various types of architectural components that are required from for the application for the data. with respect to Azure, and start going deep dive into each of the services with a practical guide on each of the topic or a core concept required for you to understand Azure and the services. So join me tomorrow for the day 2, which focuses on the application and data computing services, and go into deep dive into each of the services before getting hands-on to understand how to create an app service and what are the steps involved around that. So again, any questions on this topic, and on this topic and today's questions, feel free to put up a comment, and I will ensure to respond to the same with a clarification or the details. So thank you, and welcome. Join me back tomorrow for day 2 on Azure Architectural Components with application and data compute services.